scaring girls away because of the way I, 27M, am during intimacy. I tried to date someone, 24F, recently. Things were super going well, until the end of date number 2 when we went up to her apartment and began making out. I don't know how to explain this, but another part of my brain turned on and I started behaving very familiar with her, like getting super lovey-dovey and mushy, as you might with a long-term other with whom you have an established bond. We had some nice moments too, but I got insecure I had screwed things up, which then spiraled into me alternating between pleading with her not to ghost me, to asking her to meet my entire friend group, to planning out our next few dates. All of it was understandably overwhelming for her. She said later that I made her really uncomfortable, that she's not looking for what I'm looking for, and that she's not interested in continuing. I don't blame her. I feel terrible, but I can't fix things. So now I've just been depressed and trying to nurse my wounded self-esteem and deal with the thought there's a girl in my city who I spent 6 hours with over 2 weekends who probably thinks I'm a total creep. This isn't the first time this has happened. I can recall times when I've practiced similar patterns in one-night stands, for instance using baby talk with the person out of the blue. I can recall a time unconsciously calling an ex-baby during a meal after we'd been broken up for weeks and were hanging out as friends. I love-bombed overdid the texting with a girl over text after we were intimate for the first time and pretty much instantly scared her off. In both of my long-term relationships in my past, I was highly affectionate and expressed love in this caregiving and adoring way because that is what feels natural to me. They were great relationships, in large part because there was a lot of understanding between us and they were compatible partners for this way I overexpress affection. Edit, I say great loosely, certainly some great times, but one of them did end around the 1-year mark because she said I was too needy. So I'm having this problem of projection, boundaries, and being much too vulnerable much too soon. It's obviously a turn off for many women, and I'm certain now that I look back at my 20s it has been a major reason I rarely get past a few dates. I know intuitively I need to dial this way back until I get to know a person better, but even holding someone in my arms can be a trigger for this arising, and I'm honestly worried that something about me is fundamentally broken in terms of the way I handle myself during new intimacy. After this most recent disaster I'm thinking about how possible unresolved childhood trauma and my horrible relationship with my mother might be contributing. I'm really not sold on going to therapy, but that's mostly because I don't think I've ever tried it long enough or found the right therapist. TL, Doctor, how do I balance being my, sometimes overwhelming, self with wanting to experience intimacy during the early stages of casual dating, and is there anyone out there who can offer me some hope or advice so I can be more successful with dating in the future? Edit, reading every response and really trying to digest them all. So much good feedback, this community is great. Thank you. I would definitely commit to finding a therapist. As a woman, this would turn me off because it doesn't come off as genuine affection in the slightest. It feels either like you have no interest in getting to know me more because I'm already on a pedestal, or you're simply putting on the moves. Additionally, it's a little scary. It gives the impression you would be hard to say no to because you are already so invested. It raises red flags for stalking behavior as well. Try to focus on getting to know these women first. Use self-control and be conscious of how your actions are being perceived. Also, sometimes being a woman is exhausting because random men will use us as emotional crutches while barely knowing us, and it sounds like it may be a little of that too. You so badly want a partner to give you this affection in return that you are overwhelming these women during a stage where they don't owe you anything. I know it feels like you're giving affection, but it can feel like emotional dumping. Good luck. As a woman, this is a very good way to put it. I highly recommend therapy and working through it. Despite how you come across, I think you mean well, and you recognizing all this is a great step forward. Others have already said useful things, and I think therapy would be productive, but I also wanted to clarify that the part where you say you were alternating between pleading with her not to ghost me, to asking her to meet my entire friend group, to planning out our next few dates, to me that is not being mushy or lovey-dovey. If affection, making out, being excited by a new date, whatever, makes you automatically feel expressive or adoring towards them, that's one thing. Some people will think that's coming on too strong, some people might understand you or even be flattered. Up to you if/how you work on that part. But the reaction you're describing is not adoring, it is trying to get her to give you things that you want. You're trying to get her to behave the way you want, commit to multiple future actions when y'all have not established any relationship where she should owe you anything, and that is frustrating or sometimes even frightening to receive. I've known several guys who didn't seem to know the difference between I need to express that I really like this woman and I need to make this woman do what I want. If you can at least differentiate those things, differentiate between feeling positive things towards her versus desperately trying to cling, that will help you a lot. It might be possible for you to express mushy things early on, if that's what feels good and natural to you, while also actually listening to how she feels and respecting her autonomy. It seems like you need to find out why you feel so scared and vulnerable that you need to immediately attach yourself to someone you barely know. That's the only way to grow from this. This definitely sounds like an attachment-related issue. I'd hazard a guess and say that you have anxious attachment tendencies, grasping too hard at people when you feel insecure/scared about losing the attachment, which obviously has the opposite effect and drives them away. Do your research on attachment theory and types, and get a better understanding of how it relates to you. Doing this preliminary work will be an excellent tool to bring to therapy, and will make your time with a professional much more efficient. You've gotten some good advice about therapy and why this kind of behavior turns women off. But Emo, you are actually framing this problem wrong and no one has really commented on that. You seem to believe that this is entirely tied to being too intimate and vulnerable too soon, which is definitely part of it, but I think this is the larger problem. We had some nice moments too, but I got insecure I had screwed things up, which then spiraled into me alternating between pleading with her not to ghost me, to asking her to meet my entire friend group, to planning out our next few dates. This isn't behavior that comes across as too intimate, this is behavior that comes across as unstable, desperate, and possibly manipulative. I think this has a lot more to do with your problems with casual dating rather than you being mushy or baby talking. I'm not saying that it's good to treat these casual partners like you're in an intimate relationship, but I think the larger problem is actually that you associate the behavior in the quote above as being appropriate for an intimate relationship. Therapy is the answer for this, too. This is a great point. The moment he feels like things are going sideways, he starts acting in ways that are frankly terrifying. It's not okay to act like that with a steady girlfriend either. I, 3640F, found out about my husband's 3-year affair with co-worker. I worry about how daughter, 13F, will be affected. We're American expats in Spain. My husband told me yesterday he and his co-worker have had feelings for each other since August 2018. His co-worker's 34, married with a 5-year-old son, and considers my husband his soulmate and claims the feelings mutual. We're American expats in Spain, and his co-worker's another American expat too. His employer's American. I'm planning to divorce him, but we have a 13-year-old daughter to consider. The big problem is, of course, COVID etc. Making the affair an online rather than physical, although I think it's been a physical one, and I don't think my husband's ever thought of what the reality will be like. 2 households, 2 kids, 2 mothers-in-law, 2 ex-wives, 4 sets of grandparents, am I right? We have lived in Spain since April 2017 and are being recalled back to the US in August 2021, yes, that includes the co-worker who's in the 30 people who are being shifted from one department to a new merged department for the employer. I've never really had to deal with cheating etc. But same-sex cheating etc. The same issues of bills, dirty underwear, laundry, blocked toilet, PTA meetings etc. still apply? I'm feeling emotionally fraught and worried my marriage was a sham, even though my husband claimed I'm only attracted to him, not other guys. And my co-worker says the same thing. I don't know how to cope, not got a great support network, other than a few American expats residing here, and 3 Japanese couples who live here while their husbands are on assignment temporarily, for a different company, a Japanese employer, and I'm stuck in an expat bubble. The locals didn't really seem to like us as a family, for some reason, and this applies to the small American expat community here. I'm not sure if they'll be able to help, and one of the Japanese couples returns to Tokyo in 3 weeks' time. I want to move back to Chicago in August, although where we lived was well outside the city limits, but close enough to the center that it was like a 11-minute drive if you take Google Maps as useful. Much as I love Spain, I do miss Chicago. Before we moved to Spain in 2017, we were transplants in Texas for my husband's job. My worry is how I'll fit in, as I've not lived there since November 2014 when we moved to Texas. I can't really work due to visa issues, much as I want to, so I've had to deal with depression at times, although it's not to the level of serious depression. I'm wondering how to cope with 3 big things: the affair, looking after my daughter, and getting a job post-COVID, although I don't want to take a job, as my background's in marketing and I'm overqualified for McDonald's. Too long didn't read. Husband had 3-year-long affair with co-worker, and we're being transferred back to US in August 2021. The hardest part is dealing with your daughter. Honey, Daddy and I both love you, but Dad has a boyfriend, so we are getting a divorce. That's a necessary, but hard thing to explain to a young teen. Past that, your husband cheated on you, your daughter, and your marriage. The feelings of anger, grief, and depression all have to be felt, processed, and moved on from. Easily said, hard to do. I suggest IC for you and your daughter, and possible MC for all 3 of you, to help make the divorce as smooth as possible. It probably will be best to wait until you are back in the US to file. If possible, your and daughter might want to come earlier as a start to the separation. 4/5 months is a long time to live with your STBXH when you know the marriage is over. Okay, you should be independently trying to move back to the US with your daughter now. Do not wait until August. Get back to your support network. You need an American lawyer, ASAP, in the jurisdiction where you want to live/get divorced. For Illinois, looks like you can file after 90 days residence, but you need to have lived apart for 2 years. You should also be reaching out to recruiters. Any reason you are waiting until August to move back to Chicago? Might be a good time to have a break from him, and let you and your daughter settle in new life. Start looking for jobs online now, see what's out there for you. This is a lot. I am so very sorry you have this heartache in your life. It sounds like you don't have a very good support system in Spain. Is there anyone stateside that you can rely on for a support? Family members, close childhood friends, maybe even a divorce coach? I've watched my family member go through the divorce process, and even without the shock of an affair, it's a lot. My 30th brother-in-law, 28M, threatened me over a year ago. I'm not sure if it's worth telling my husband. I had a very good relationship with my brother-in-law before all of this. My husband and I have been married for 8 years. Shortly after our 5th wedding anniversary, we broke up. I initiated it because something traumatic happened, and it made me realize I wasn't my husband's first priority or even second. I had 0 contact with most of my in-laws after the first month of our separation, when they couldn't convince me to tell them why I had suddenly moved out. My husband is an extremely private man, and I chose to respect his wish to not tell his family anything. Eventually, they came to their own conclusions that I was the bad guy in the situation. I wasn't surprised, since my husband is the perfect golden boy in the family who couldn't possibly do any wrong. The last message I received from my bill was him telling me I had never deserved my husband in the first place, which hurt a lot since I was already at a very low point. By the time I had to come face to face with his family again, I had reached a point where I just wanted to be done with the divorce, and I didn't care if they thought I was the bad guy or not. So, I didn't try to correct any of their accusations, and there were a lot. A year after we separated, I went to visit my sister-in-law. We were friends before I married her brother, and she was the only one in the family who made it clear that they didn't blame me for the separation and that she wanted to maintain a relationship with me. I stayed with her for 2 weeks, and during the last week my Bill and his wife showed up unexpectedly. If looks could kill, I wouldn't be writing this right now. My Bill tore into me. He called me every horrible name under the sun, told me he wished I had never met his family, accused me of planning this from the beginning, told me I was lucky I was a woman because I wouldn't like what he would do to me if I was a man. etc. Then he told me he would ruin my life the way I had ruined his brother's life, and that he would make sure I regretted ever looking at his family. I believe he would have said more, but at this point, his sister threatened to call my husband and said something to him in a language I don't speak. Whatever she said must have got through to him because he left immediately. Obviously, I was upset and frightened by the whole thing, but since my bill never actually followed through with his threat and my sil assured me he wasn't serious, I put this interaction to the back of my mind. Here's the problem. My husband convinced me to give him a 6-month trial period to see if we could reconcile, and then the lockdown happened, so we got stuck together for even longer than I expected. I will admit that I only agreed to the trial period because I desperately wanted one marital asset that held a lot of sentimental value for me, but he was refusing to give it up even though it was the only thing I wanted and it didn't mean nearly as much to him. I had pretty much given up on getting it until he offered to let me have it if I gave his trial idea a chance. I wasn't expecting him to put much effort in, and I definitely didn't expect us to reconcile. Now my sil is getting married in about 2 months. My husband expects me to go with him. His sister expects me to attend too. His family know we have reconciled, but I haven't seen any of them in person since. The idea of having to see them, especially my bill, makes me feel sick. I thought I was over what he said to me, but I'm only now accepting just how much he terrified me in the moment. I'm not sure if I should tell my husband. He's very close to his brother and I don't want to ruin their relationship. There's also a chance his sister has already told him, and he just didn't think it was important enough to bring it up again. I also believe my bill only said what he said because he could see my husband falling apart, something I wasn't aware of at the time. I don't think he would actually hurt me, so in the grand scheme of things, it isn't a big deal. I also think I'll be fine once we get there and everyone gets used to seeing me again, but if I say anything it could make things tense and ruin the wedding. What do I do? Is it worth telling him, or should I continue pretending it never happened? Too long didn't read. My bill threatened to ruin my life the way I had ruined his brother's life, and that he would make sure I regretted ever looking at his family, while I was separated from my husband. We eventually reconciled and my husband wants me to go to his sister's wedding with him, where I'll need to interact with his family. I don't know if I should tell him what his brother said to me or if I should just forget about it.